So I am an art historian by training. I did a PhD in art history, but in American art and in post-war American art. So I'm not coming to the Enlightenment from from like a really straightforward historical perspective. I came to it because the topics that I was studying brought me to it. So and interestingly enough, one of the chapter of my dissertation, for one of those chapters, I read this book by Terry Castle called The Female Thermometer, which is about 18th century culture and the uncanny and the strangeness, and which kind of like made me question all of my belief about what I knew or thought I knew about the Enlightenment. And it was a very nice, interesting way to start thinking about question that has to do with rationality, anti-rationality, and irrationality, and seeing how those three different concepts work with one another or did not. So that's how I first, became engaged with the Enlightenment, I guess, through what we sometimes call the anti-Enlightenment. I don't know if I have a very specific definition to give you, or like what would be my definition of the Enlightenment. I think, again, it's very influenced because I am definitely somebody who lives in the 21st century. And so I am always interested when politicians, for instance, are bringing the term into the political arena to justify, you know, uh, this or that policy, or to identify with the bright French past, for instance. So it's a very probably anti definition because it probably has not little it has little to do with the actual meaning of enlightenment. But I find it also very interesting because the definition, it means the definition has changed and continued to evolve, and what was meant by the Enlightenment maybe 50 years ago doesn't mean the same thing today, or we retain different concepts. And I think that's very interesting to explore. There's a few things I can say about that. I feel like it's still a very prolific domain or field of studies. There's still a lot of people who are studying it, writing about it. So that means something. That means that there's still things to be said, and or correct, or amend, or rethink. So I feel like that's one part. But again, in the public discourse, which is also something I'm interested in, I think that the two terms that are being discussed in relationship with the Enlightenment is universality. So I think that's something that is very, especially in this kind of like that today's time, something that people are very interested in rethinking and argue for or against, and also the question of like maybe obscurantism, but in the 21st century, which is disinformation, fake news, and all in relation with all of this current problem. And I'm seeing sadly that we kind of like use the past to justify like rationalism, to argue for rationality or like objectivity or all of this term without really rethinking them. And so we're basically making the same mistake again. So and I totally understand. I mean, of course we should fight all of these forms of obscurantism, but by also rethinking, I mean, it's an opportunity to rethink those very important concepts and apply them to 21st century problem, in hope that we will not make the same mistake as in the past. Yeah, I mean, I think because historically it's a very Eurocentric term, I think that's probably one of the main challenges, to make it relevant in the 21st century, more global realm of academic discourse, and really engage those theory and those this history with other philosophies from other parts of the world. And I think that's a really big challenge that needs to be addressed. And of course, some people are doing this. There's a lot of work around postcoloniality and the Enlightenment. There's been a lot of published excellent text on this. But also, I think I mean, the term and just again, because I'm thinking in images, the term enlightenment is also comes across as rather elitist, because it means that there is a few, enlightened people that are bringing the light to the other people and to the rest of the world. And I think that's a really hard, metaphor to keep going. And that's why I usually say that I'm working on in the 18th century rather than using that term, because first of all, it opens up to the opportunity to bring other types of form of discourses or culture in the conversation, and it doesn't have this kind of like very specific, again, this very specific meaning, which of course is not specific because there's so many definitions, but I feel like it opens up the way of talking about the Enlightenment without constructing it to a certain number of philosophers or writers or thinkers that were engaged at the time. That's, I mean, again, because I am not myself, I've not been trained in this field. It's really hard to pinpoint the, what needs to be worked out in more details. But I do think it would be very interesting to insist or to explore how this idea of like anti-rationality and all of this idea of the strange and the bizarre and the uncanny, although the term is not, an 18th century one, and how those ideas worked out in relation with the more well-known concept that we know of the 18th century, which is rationality, scientificism, and all of these things, and how did they work out together? Because I think we would get to more nuanced definition of each, and which will be very useful for now, for our discussion now.